In the world of Final Fantasy. Wait, no, that's the name of a game now. In Final Fantasy 15, we see the end results of many years of patience and strife for its fandom. Its story is relatively well known these days, but it's still worth knowing entering the world. Originally announced in 2006 as part of the fabulous Nova Crystallis line of Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy Versus 13, as it was originally known, was meant to be part of that set that built a subset of connected games that pulled from a similar lore. Along with it was Final Fantasy 13 and Final Fantasy Type 0. The project stalled behind the scenes many times in the coming years before being re-revealed as Final Fantasy 15 in 2013. The game still needed until late 2016 to finish development. Originally creating its hype from the Final Fantasy name and the use of an action-based combat system similar to the Kingdom Hearts games in the tagline, "A fantasy based on reality," Final Fantasy 15 was a title dearly desired and pined for during its development hell. Now, can any game live up to a decade of desperate hype? Can the expectations ever fall to realistic levels? At the very least, I can speak from outside this circle of thought. As a person that has never been a dedicated fan of the Final Fantasy games, this will be my first time finishing a Final Fantasy game. Let's see how it holds up. Final Fantasy 15 is a Japanese RPG. It's an action JRPG, but it's still a JRPG fundamentally. The actual battle system is quite unique, employing a system more driven by situational awareness and timing than most action JRPGs find themselves doing. From a conceptual standpoint, the gameplay is based around a few options. First, you can attack by holding a button. Second, you can put up an evasive guard by holding a button and consuming MP. There are also traversal options as seen in Noctis' warp abilities. The player's role is to set up Noctis and his entourage to definitely minimize the enemy's strengths while finding openings to land attacks. Positioning and resource management are key. Tactical options range from character progression to items. Character progression is based on the Ascension chart. Here, upgrades ranging from stat increases to ability unlocks and out-of-battle skills are available. AP is a resource collected to improve a character, and it accumulates from level ups and simply just playing the game in specific ways. Each of your party members also take part in battle. While you can't control them directly, you can team up with them for a variety of character-specific abilities. They can also join in on joint attacks created by flanking enemies or other opportune moments. Each of your entourage has a clearly defined role. Gladio is the damage-dealing tank, Ignis is the tactical support, and Prompto tends to die a lot. Yeah. Items, on the other hand, are your outlet for healing. You have some healing options in your entourage's abilities, but these are mainly situational. Primarily, you will rely on items. First of all, it's notable that health works a bit differently in this than most games. A character's health represents their ability to take damage until they remain vulnerable. They're not quite dead at that point, but basically once you're vulnerable, a party member will be incapable of fighting back and slowly lose their maximum health they can reach in that battle. They can be brought back to battle with some help of that party member, or by applying a healing item, but unless you bring back the maximum health specifically, you won't be able to get them up any higher based on both their regenerative healing, or based on bringing them back with another party member. Healing items range from partial potions to max revivals of the entire party, so there's a lot of power here. Healing actually offers a bit of a different variance on the game. Difficulty flexibility. It actually would be rare for a player to have their party just die outright. At worst, even when I was completely outmatched, I found myself fleeing battles. Healing items can be really game-breaking, but you're not forced to use them. Instead, the wide range of healing potencies allows you to pick and choose how difficult you're willing to make the game. What items you use and how you use them are typically just a reflection of the player's skills and progression and how they match up against the enemy. If you choose to take on the challenge of becoming very skilled at the game, it's an option to not use any healing. If you just want to have fun and get through each encounter and move on with the story, that's plenty an option as well, even on the normal difficulty. The important part is how the game feels, and it feels satisfying. Between the animations and flow of battle, it just feels good. Add in Noctis' warping abilities, and the cool factor is added in to just make it so much better. If you've played the previous demos released on the game and had some questions about it, I will say it is so much better than it used to be. It's a strong step up. There are still some camera problems in the more claustrophobic areas for battles and the like, but generally that's not really something that seems worth complaining about in the endgame. The gameplay of Final Fantasy 15 is consistently fun and engaging. I never found myself getting bored of it. even after 20-30 hours or so. The difficulty flexibility allows the challenge to feel just right for how I wanted it to as well. And as much as some may want that classic Final Fantasy combat back, it's really hard to deny that this system works really well on its own right. Final Fantasy XV begins with Crown Prince Noctis leaving on his journey to the city of Otessia. Accompanied by his entourage of friends and bodyguards, he heads there to get married to a woman named Lunafreya. The marriage is one to create a symbol of peace, though the two have known each other for a long time and actually look forward to the marriage themselves. Riding in the reliable steed, aka a luxury convertible car, Noctis heads off on a road trip to his fate. While the modern setting really does work, it very much is a Final Fantasy story. While I'm not a long-time fan, even I can tell you the involvement of crystals, prophecies, saving the world, and all that stuff in a typical Final Fantasy plot. You have your chocobos, you have your summons, and the summons are even sewn into the setting itself, which are really cool. The characters are even sort of pretty typical what you'd expect from Final Fantasy. Each serves a party role to flesh out the battle tactics, and their personality tend to meld to create a stereotypical group dynamic between the four. And they have their depth too, but it can take some digging in inference to get there. The execution of character development for most every character in the story could have used a bit more refining, but often the message does get itself across by the end of the game. In a sense, it can be quite interesting, because the story of Final Fantasy XV might actually be where it gets the worst rap. From just seeing comments on the internet and whatnot, I've seen plenty of claims that say the game is incomplete, and they're pretty commonplace at the time of writing this review. Honestly, I don't personally see it. There's certainly a lot more that could have been done, and much more that could have been done better, but it still feels distinctively cohesive in its story from beginning to end. Most of these complaints delve into the fact that there's a lot of lore and backgrounds of each of the characters that are provided in the companion media like Brotherhood anime series or the Kingsglaive movie, and they're not really given in the game. While this is true, the important bits of each of these relationships and backgrounds feel like they get themselves across in the game itself. And they are patching it to put in more details and yada yada yada, etc, etc. So if you play it in the future, it'll probably be there anyways, in some form. But I'm generally just inclined to believe that the issue is more focused on the storytelling style than it is the lack of actual content for this. Final Fantasy XV has a much greater emphasis on showing over telling. And this is sort of an oddity for JRPGs. JRPGs typically have just tons of dialogue in them, and with this, extensive lore and many other moments of character development can be sprawled across dozens of hours of an epic storyline. And instead you have this emphasis on showing, where the cinematic nature of each scene is much more significant. There's definitely a lot fewer story moments in general, but the details and impact of each are heavily enhanced in my opinion. The problems lie in execution, which can vary from being stilted to amazing at times. Now, this greater cinematic emphasis in the storytelling style than what most JRPGs have also allows for a story that, to me, feels more cohesive than a normal JRPG. While most JRPGs are constantly trying to counteract their storytelling structure with a lot of info, with a lot of character, with a lot of other stuff, Final Fantasy XV can embrace it to make every event and decision you make feel natural to the world around it. Much like the gameplay, the plot can flow naturally into each other as it builds up to one of the most satisfying, perfect endings to a game I've played to date. If I had to describe the presentation of Final Fantasy XV in one word, it would be grand. Visually, the game has a scale fitting to the open world tag, and the scale makes the road trip feel real. Little details are all around, and the music captures this grand feeling wonderfully. It's quite detailed, and plenty goes on at any given moment. This can be a bit of a problem in combat, as a hectic nature means that it's easy to lose track of the threats around Noctis. The music at some points can be difficult to pay attention to because you're busy at the combat, though it's all really good music, from the battle to the normal stuff to all around. This definitely gets a lot better as you go along and get used to it, but it's still something to be aware of, as it can impose its own little difficulty curve in its own right. It's quite detailed, and even still, the scale and details can come together wonderfully at the right moments to make the story and battle moments feel perfect all the same. There are many moments throughout I would describe as distinctly memorable because of the role the presentation played. Of course, it's not perfect. Random graphical bugs or weird cameras can be a pain. Battles inside areas that are particularly small can be headache-inducing. And the camera's competency may as well be based on a dice roll at some of those points. Outside of that, though, the level of polish is exceptional. Everything feels good, and everything from attack effects to the zippiness of movement, it just blends into the satisfying feel of the combat excellently. It helps develop a feeling of adventure, and sometimes that's what you want. Final Fantasy XV is definitely the story of a road trip, and this is true from top to bottom, and a lot of the enjoyment comes from how well it executes this feeling. Road trips are often romanticized as an outlet for adventure, traveling, goofing off, staying in town, camping, fighting giant serpents. It's all part of the package, and I'd say that Final Fantasy XV succeeds at this. Its structure hasn't moved from an open world to a more linear story in its second half, but it does all this while also feeling like a conclusion to that road trip. Early stages give you an open world with an appropriately fast feeling to it. There are tons to do, with you and your entourage picking and choosing how to laze about your time together and take things easy even as the threat looms in the background. There are always stakes on the line, but the stakes just tend to mirror character development itself. As the stakes rise, the fun and lazing of the past gets replaced with the hardship and responsibility of the future. I won't pretend I did everything in the open world though. In fact, I could probably triple or quadruple my playtime if I did. What Final Fantasy XV does well is it gives you options and gives them naturally. You want to go take a picture in front of the cool rock formations? Feel free. Want to delve into hunts of ferocious demons roaming the lands? All the more power to you. Everything feels like it's your choice. And it's your road trip. With access to a car so you can take in the sights and let the content filling the world come to you, Final Fantasy XV is all about doing what you want, as you slowly lose that sense of freedom throughout the story as the story takes it away from you, as it also does from Noctis and his entourage. And this is just all part of how the game does flow right. From the satisfying gameplay to the progress of the cinematics, everything just flows naturally from one another. The road trip is just another one of the symptoms of this achievement. Final Fantasy XV is an exciting and satisfying experience. It has its holes and pacing issues. It's not perfect. None of these really felt like they were much of a bother to me, and it's not like it was life-changing in any way. It's not like the greatest game ever. But the journey is one of a road trip, with stakes increasing at every stop, and it feels like it really delivers on giving that feeling of a road trip as well. You never feel pressure to do anything you don't feel like doing, and the camaraderie on display gives plenty of motivation to just go have fun with your entourage. The word connecting everything in the game really boils down to flow, the natural progression through the gameplay, exploration, plot, and much more. With satisfying combat and a difficulty curve that actually is adaptable to your skill level, Final Fantasy XV is just fun. It's a top-of-the-genre experience, whatever that genre is at this point. People who just desperately want a classic Final Fantasy gameplay system won't find it here. It's just not going to be. But there's still plenty to enjoy. I love to come back to this setting, which is great, for another adventure in this world. And maybe one day Square Enix will satiate that desire. Recommendation: Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, that's an obvious one. It's not really that much like Kingdom Hearts anymore. It used to be, if you look at the old gameplay videos, it really was. I mean, it was made by the guy originally who made Kingdom Hearts, so it makes sense why that was, and he's not on it anymore, and it's sort of been taken over by the director and other stuff, and stuff. It's still good. It's still action JRPG-ish. It still has that feeling of Final Fantasy influence to it. It's a Final Fantasy game, obviously. It still feels like a Final Fantasy game with that whole action aspect to it. So sort of like Kingdom Hearts has that. I mean, it's not going to be the same, but if you might like it. The other one I was going to suggest is the Tales series, which realistically is the other action JRPG I know about, and it's fun, and it brings you on an adventure. Basically, every single Tales game does that, and I think this one does that. And I guess I sort of like this Final Fantasy game in the same way I like Tales games. I mean, it's very different in its own right, but I feel as it gave like the same sort of thing I wanted out of a game from it, and I can't complain about that because Tales games are just like baseline enjoyable. And that's all I got. This probably took a while to get out. Gotta be honest, I've been a little busy with stuff. I'm starting to finish up some other stuff, and I'm probably gonna have like 5 reviews coming up, so I'm gonna have to get my butt working on those really quickly because, ooh, that's gonna overwhelm me if I don't get on it quickly. See y'all next time. Drive safely.